In this video, we're going to continue with part 2 of Android Studio for the AppInventor user. This video series is meant as a transition if you've used AppInventor but not Android Studio and you have a need to use Android Studio. We're going to take a look at technical things now. Number 1, procedures, then initialization blocks, event handlers, calling another screen, if tests, and comparisons. A lot of the things that we saw in AppInventor in the blocks view. So we can start by thinking about an initialization block. If I take a look at my application now, I'm going to click on main activity, and you see this onCreate method. The onCreate, this is what's called a method. A method is going to have 4 important things: an access modifier, a return type, which in this case is void, a unique name, and then a list of parameters. Okay, I have a separate video that talks a lot about what methods are, so I won't go into too much detail aside from saying what that is the same thing as going here to control and actually going to screen and choosing when screen 1 initialize do. So this little block that you see here, if we wanted to do any initialization work, that's what would go on right here in this onCreate method. Okay, so again, this is kind of like the blocks view, where this view that we saw in the last video is more like the designer view. Okay, so the design is in XML, the blocks is in Java. Okay, so a procedure in AppInventor is what we would call a method in Android Studio. Okay, in other words, let's take a look at one of the procedures that we made in AppInventor. We made a procedure down here where we would, let me scroll down a bit, initialize counters. We set all of our counter variables to 0. That's a procedure. And you see we kind of have a little block here, and then we have a sequence of steps that are going to execute in order. So we call that procedure from several places, but one of them is the clear button. Let me find the clear button handler just a moment. It's probably over here to the right just a bit. Okay, just a moment. Well, here we go. We have the initialize block there. Here we go, call reinitialize counters. So we have a handler for our show new button, and that's going to call this procedure called reinitialize counters. So 2 concepts there I want to talk about. Number 1, how do we make a handler for a button? And number 2, how do we create a procedure? Okay, let me go back to my designer, and we see we have this button called new button. I'm going to double click on the tab so we can see it in high definition. Move it over just a little bit here. I'm going to scroll down, and we're going to see something called on click. I'm going to give this a name. We're going to say on. I don't want to give it a terribly generic name. Let's say on show message clicked. Okay. Now, important, highlight this and copy it. We're going to need it later. Okay, so on show message clicked. Okay, now let's make a handler for this button. I'm going to go back to my main activity, and the handler is going to need to be a method. Again, method similar to a procedure, and the method's going to have a very precise format. Remember, access modifier, return type, method name, parameter list. Here's what our button handler method is going to look like. Public, void, now paste, on show message clicked, open paren, view v, open curly, close curly. Wow, what's all this stuff? Okay, let me go ahead, Alt Enter, do an import here. Okay, you might remember that we talked about, what did we call them in AppInventor? We had like final parameters, I think. We had parameters that can be passed into a method, and we also have a return type from a method. So this is a parameter that can be passed into a method. This is a return type from the method. This is the method name. Now let me show you the equivalent in AppInventor. Okay, here's a method name. This method has no return type, which is what we consider void. It also has no parameters that are getting passed into it. Now let's take a look at this method called evaluateElement. And by the way, if you're just watching this video, you haven't seen any previous videos, this is something that I made in a previous video. Method name, evaluateElement. Parameters passed in, element count and element name. Okay, so method name, onMessage clicked. Parameter passed in, viewV. Return type is void. Okay, the return type here, that's what we have this result. This result is going to go back to the place where this procedure was called. Okay, so if I scroll up a bit, evaluateElement, you see what gets returned from this procedure is going to get set into this variable, local variable, called resultMessage. Now on our button click example, we're not returning anything, so we just put void as the return type. Our method, onShowMessageClicked, has to match exactly with what's in this onClick property of the button itself. Okay, and viewV, okay, what's that? You might be wondering, how did I come up with this method name? Well, this is just a special, what we're going to call method signature that handles button clicks. It has to accept viewV as a parameter. It has to return void. It has to be public. Those things are a given for a button event handler. The only thing that we are allowed to come up with is this method name onShowMessageClicked. Okay, so open curly, close curly, that's what we're going to call the scope of the method. Let's go back to AppInventor again and take a look at a button handler there. Okay, if we take a look, I'll just pick one at random here, button clear. Do you see how we kind of have this brown event handler? And then we have lines of logic, a sequence of steps within this event handler. Okay, so the equivalent in Android Studio, open curly, close curly, that's defining essentially this brown handler with all the steps inside. So if we wanted to replicate this, we would need to put each of those steps in between the curlies, and that's very important. All of the sequence, selection, and iteration that we're going to do has to be within a method, and by within a method, I mean within its curlies. Okay? So the access modifier, return type, and parameter list, that's just a given based on this is a button handler. The method name is what we come up with, and then the open and close curly defines the scope of this method. Okay, so procedures, blocks and initialization we took a look at, event handler we took a look at, if test and comparisons, we'll take a look at those next. And we'll also look at how to show a message. Okay, I'm going to go back to my drawing screen and I'm going to add maybe some kind of text widget. Okay, we'll go with plain text. Okay, and a couple things I'm going to do. Well, let's see. We'll stretch this guy out to align parent right, give us a little bit of room, and we'll try and get him to stretch like so. Okay, so what I'm going to do is a couple things. First of all, this edit text, I'm going to rename it. Anytime we're programming against a variable, we know we want to give it an appropriate name, something that we're going to remember. So I'm going to come down here, ID edit text. We're going to change that to txt name. And we're also going to give it a hint, which is enter your name. Now remember a good design idea with Android. Let's not have separate labels in text entry. Let's make use of the hint attribute, because that will show a little hint inside of our text entry area, and that saves us one component. Traditionally, we would have a label and we would have data input. If we combine those, that consolidates the number of widgets that we need to have on our screen. So there's our txt name. Now my button, I'm going to make some changes to that as well. ID, btn show message. Okay. And yeah, that's fine. Okay. And hint, we don't need a hint. I do want to change the label on it though. So instead of new button, we're going to say show message. Okay, looks a little bit better. Okay, now what do we do? Remember txt name, remember that. Let's go to main activity, and what we're going to do in our button handler is, first of all, we're going to verify that the user entered a name. If the user entered a name, we're going to give the user a greeting. If the user did not enter a name, we're going to say, okay, you need to enter a name. So we need to get access to that text component. Best place to do that is in this onCreate method. So I'm going to say find view by ID, okay? And I'm going to say r.id.txt name. Remember when I said, remember to name your variables. Now, how did I know find view by ID and r.id.txt name? Well, that's just how we access components in the blocks view or this code view from the designer view or the XML view. That's just a magic way we do it. We have to say find view by ID, and then we have to pick it out by its ID. Remember what the ID is. That's the name that we gave to our text view earlier. If we scroll up here in properties, we gave it this ID. But we can't just put that ID in verbatim. We have to give it some context. We have to say r.id.textName. And that would be true if we were looking for the button, which we don't need to do this, so I'm going to delete it in just a moment. But find view by ID, r.id.btn show message. Anything we want access to, we have to do this find view by ID and then r.id. whatever the unique ID is. So this will give us a reference to that text field. We need to save it somewhere. So what I'm going to do in Android Studio is Control-Alt-F, which takes the return type of this method and saves it into a field. When I say field, think global variable. Again, remember what a global variable is. Those were those things where we said initialize global molecules like this. We just kind of have them sitting out in the open. The advantage of being a field or a global variable is that we can access it from multiple methods. So I'm going to go ahead and accept their proposal here. Okay, just a moment. Okay, and what you'll see happen, let me just clean, it looks like I put in an extra space. What you'll see happen is it takes this text field and it saves it into this variable called view by ID. We're going to go ahead and call it txt name. And we're also, let me change both the declaration and the assignment down here, txt name. We're also going to change it from a view to an edit text. Okay? And save. Edit text is a more specific type of view. It means, hey, we realize that this is something where the user can enter some text. Okay. Okay, get a red line here, Alt-Enter. We are going to say import class, there we go. And then I'm still going to have a red line here, incompatible types, Alt-Enter. I am going to cast this, I'm going to say edit text, like so, and save. Wow, what in the world was that? Well, view is a very general type. We want to make this a more specific type, edit text. So a view could be any widget on our screen. Could be a plain text, could be passwords, spinner, rating bar, any of those. We want to tell it that we specifically know this is an edit text component. So I declare the variable edit text. What do I mean by declare variable? To declare a variable, I have to have a variable type and a unique variable name. So I declare the variable edit text, and then I do this little cast operation, which says, hey, I realize that this is an edit text. I want to make sure that I'm using this as an edit text. Okay, I realize that's a little bit confusing. So I have some more videos that explain that, but in any case, this is just the pattern that we follow to get access to something like a text field on the screen. Okay, finally, now I'm in onShowMessageClicked. I'm going to say txtName.getText. Okay. In Android Studio now, I'm going to put my cursor over getText, Control-Alt-V, which means assign this to a variable. Okay. We'll say username, like so. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an if test. You might remember what our if test looked like in AppInventor. We would typically have, I'll scroll down and find one here, if, then else. If, and then a comparison. What to do if that comparison returns true, else what to do if that comparison returns false. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, actually, I'll tell you, I'm going to change this just a little bit. I'm going to say get text.toString. I want to use this as a raw string type. So I'm declaring a variable username of type string. What are the different options that we can use as variable types? I do have a different video that will talk a little bit about that. That is also a 5-minute conversation. I don't want this video to go too long, so I'll be happy to refer you to a different video on variable types. But nonetheless, here we have string username. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if username.trim.length, or you know what I can do, actually even better. If username is empty, okay, open curly, close curly. So if test, open curly, then part, okay? And then I'm going to say else, open curly, close curly, okay? If this is the then part, this is the else part. Again, back to AppInventor, we have if, and then we have a comparison test, a then part, and an else part. Same thing exists here in Android Studio, it just exists with kind of curly braces. If username is empty. Okay, what I want to do is I want to show a notification. Remember what a notification is? We had our notification manager also in AppInventor, so notifier 1, and we could use this to show a message to the user. Okay, so you see call notifier 1, show alert notice. I will warn you the syntax for this is much more difficult in native Android and Android Studio. Okay, so to show a message, a lot of this is going to be boilerplate. So don't be concerned with every little symbol. I'll just show you how to do it. Toast.makeText, this, comma, and then whatever text we want to show, you need to enter a username. Okay, comma, and then we are going, let me alt enter to import toast, sorry. Then toast dot length long, we'll go ahead and use length long, and then dot show. Open paren, close paren, terminate with a semicolon. Wow, I bet now you're thinking I need to rewind that and watch it again. Well, let's just do this. Anytime you need to show a notification, copy and paste this, and if I remember, I will put this in the comments of the video so you can copy and paste it from there. The text that you want to show, just put it right here. Don't worry about all the other minutia, just know the text that you want to show goes right in the middle here. Put it in quotes and then surrounded by commas. So let me show how to do that. I'm going to grab this, copy, paste, and what I might say here is welcome, okay, and that's going to be a constant string, and then plus, and then username. So we'll make kind of a custom message based on what the user put into that text field. Okay, deep breath, let me save debug, and we'll watch it run. Now it's running in the emulator, so first of all, notice that our hint appears in the text entry field. Again, that's a way I mentioned you can save screen real estate, which is the most valuable commodity in a mobile app. Just put the hint right there in the message box. If I hit show message right now, we're going to get the message you need to enter a username. And why is that? Because we have our if test, this evaluated to true, indicating that there's no text there, and it gives us you need to enter username. Now let me go ahead and put in checkers, that's my dog, and show message, and what do we get? Welcome checkers. So you see, in this video, we have looked at procedures, blocks for initialization, event handlers or methods, specifically how to handle buttons. Calling another screen, sorry, we'll capture that in a different video. This video is getting kind of long. If tests and comparison within if tests. And so you see what we've done, while it was a bit cumbersome, we got access to this text box which is on our screen. Okay, we were able to take that, get the string that the user entered, see if it's empty and put up one message. If it's not empty, put up a different message. So all of that we're able to do in a few lines of code, and yes, I know a little bit of symbols and some things like that. All of that we're able to do in a few lines of code. So what's next? First of all, we are going to want to take a look at calling another screen. We'll look at that in a different video. Secondly, this is considered a major no-no. I've hard-coded English text, which is a big no-no because we want to be able to support users in their preferred languages. So we're going to want to refactor this to strings.xml, but again, that's a video we'll save for a later date. I think we've covered quite a bit in this video. So I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you.